Welcome to Presume Technologies. I am Venkat. This is part 12 of ASP.NET MVC tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss creating a view to insert data. Please watch part 11 before proceeding with this video. We want to create a view which allows the user to enter name, gender, city, date of birth, and then once the user clicks on this create button, we want to store the employee details to a database table. In part 11, if you remember, we have implemented an index view which actually lists all the employees that are present in TBL employee table. Let's flip to Visual Studio. Let me actually run this project and navigate to employee controller and index action method. Look at this. This page is listing all the employees that are present in TBL employee table. Now, when I click on this create new link, we are actually navigating to employee controller create action method. Now, within the employee controller class, do we have the create action method? No. And that's the reason why we have this error message, the resource cannot be found, HTTP status code 404. So obviously, to fix this error, the first thing to do is to implement this create action method within the employee controller class. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that action method. So I'm going to simply copy the action method that we already have there, and I'm going to change the name to create, and then I'm going to get rid of this code, and then I'm simply going to return a view. Okay, and then I'm going to decorate this controller action method with HTTP get attribute, meaning this controller action method will only respond to a get request of this URL. So if somebody navigates to this URL localhost MVC demo employee controller and create action, okay, if it is the get request, meaning if it is the initial get request of this view, I mean URL, only then this controller action method will respond. Okay, so that's why I have decorated this with HTTP get. Now, after I enter the data, name, gender, city, date of birth, and then once I click this create button, what are we actually doing? We are posting the data back to the server. At that point of time, this controller action method will not respond. We'll have another version of create which will be decorated with HTTP post attribute, which is going to receive the posted form data, and then we'll submit that back to the database server, to be stored in the database table. We'll talk about that in our next video session. First, in this video, let's say creating this view for the end user to enter employee data. Okay, so this is the controller action method which is going to respond only to the get request of this URL. Okay, so now the next step is to create a view, and to create a view, it's very straightforward. All you need to do is right click on the controller action method, from the context menu select add view. So our view name is going to be create. I'm going to use the Razor View Engine. We are going to create a strongly typed view, and then I'm going to select the employee class as our model class. And then the scaffold template, I'm going to select create as the scaffold template, and then I'm going to click this add button, which should add create view to the employees folder within views folder. So I have this create.cshtml view. The first thing that we need to do, if you scroll all the way down, I have this section scripts that is generated. At the moment, I'm going to get rid of this code. We'll talk about the sections and scripts in a later video session. And to format this properly, I'm going to use a div tag, and then I'm going to specify a style, and then set font family to Arial. And then let's take this div tag and put it at the bottom of this view. Okay, so that's the only change. Now let's go ahead and run this and see what we get. So let's navigate to employee controller and index action method, and then once we click on this create new, we are navigated to this URL employee controller create action method, and look at the form. We have all text boxes for name, gender, city, date of birth, etc. But gender, in an ideal world, it's better to have a drop down list instead of a text box. Okay, so let's see how to get a drop down list instead of a text box, and that's very straightforward. Okay, all we need to do is within this view create.cs html, we will have, look at this, for gender. Okay, so we are using this HTML helper editor for model.gender. So for gender, which is a string, we are using this HTML helper editor for, which is rendering this text box by default. Okay, but instead of that we want a drop down list, and to do that all you need to do is, instead of using the editor for HTML helper, I'm going to use an HTML helper drop down list. And then obviously this helper method has got several parameters. So first we need to specify the name of the property of the employee object, which is that gender. And then look at this HTML helper method has got several overloads. I'm going to use this overload. Look at this. This is the first parameter is the name of the property of the employee object, which is gender. And the second property is what options do you want within that drop down list. And it is, look at this, it's actually an IEnumerable of select list item objects. Okay, so which means I can pass a new list object, and then it's going to be select list item object. So let's specify, it's a new list of select list item. So I'm going to create a new select list item object, and obviously the constructor of this class has got two properties, text. So what is the text that we want within the drop down list? Male. And the value is also going to be male. So a drop down list will have both text and value. In our case both of them are going to be text and value as male. Similarly, let's have another select list item which will be female, and text value is also female. Okay, so that's it. Now let me go ahead and run this and see if we get a drop down list. So let's navigate to employee index, and let's go to that create form. Look at that, I get a drop down list. Now look at this, by default male is selected here, but let's say I want another string which says select gender. How do I get that? So there is, if you look at this drop down list HTML helper, it has got several overloads. I'm going to use another overloaded version. Look at that, I'm going to use this version, which also takes an optional option label. Okay, so what that's going to be, select gender, and that's of type string, so I'm enclosing that within double quotes. Okay, and if you want to properly format this, select the entire HTML and press Ctrl K and D. That should format that properly. So if you look at this now, look at this code is properly formatted. Now let me go ahead and run this and navigate to employee controller, index action, click on this create new. Look at that, we get the drop down list with that option as well, select gender. Alright, so now obviously look at this, we have this URL employee create. Now when I enter this URL and press enter there, that's the get request for the web form. So obviously this controller action method will respond within create employee controller. This action method will respond to that URL request. On the other hand, look at this, if I don't enter, if I click this button create, what's going to happen, this web form will be posted back to the server. Okay, now look at this, I get this error message, the resource cannot be found, but I have a create action method within the employee controller. Why did I still get this? If you look at this, I have the create action method within the employee controller, but I still got this error message. That is because when I click this button, create, we're actually posting the form data. So that's an HTTP post request. And here, since we have decorated this action method with HTTP GET, this controller action method will only respond to the GET request of that URL. But when I post the web form back, when I click this button, I'm submitting the form, in which case, it looks for a create action method with HTTP post attribute. We don't have that. And this action method is decorated with the HTTP get attribute, meaning this will only be used for, get request of that URL. Okay, in our next video we'll discuss actually posting the data back, entering data, and then once I click on this create button, we will actually discuss storing this data to a database table. On this slide you can find resources for ASP.NET, C# and SQL Server interview questions. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.